Hello and welcome to another episode of 360 Health. I am Ogechukwu Ukekwe. The Borno State Network for Health Equity and Development and the Borno State Ministry of Health have collaborated to combat the menace of malaria in the state. The project manager for Borno State Network for Health Equity and Development, Binta Bako, said that preventive measures like using mosquito nets is crucial to reducing malaria transmission within the state capital and beyond. While distributing mosquito nets provided by the Borno State government through the Ministry of Health to the underprivileged in the state capital, Bako said that residents must take responsibilities for their health despite the huge efforts by the government to combat malaria. She noted that the state government is committed to making the state malaria-free, using very effective measures to keep people safe and healthy. The United Nations says that 3 more African countries, Benin, Liberia, Sierra Leone, have joined the rollout of malaria vaccine, targeting millions of children in the continent, but account for 95% of malaria deaths. The vaccine rollout announced on World Malaria Day seeks to further scale up vaccine development in the African region. African accounts for approximately 94% of global malaria cases. According to the World Health Organization, most of the deaths are of children. A statement by WHO and the United Nations Children's Fund said that the 3 nations joined other African countries offering the malaria vaccines as part of their childhood immunization programs. The United Kingdom has committed £1 billion to the global funds in a move to combat the scourge of malaria and other diseases in Nigeria. The health advisor at the British High Commission, Ebere Nwachukwu, disclosed this initiative during an interview with newsmen in Abuja. Corresponding with World Malaria Day, Nwachukwu emphasized that the UK government contribution was channeled into a global fund aimed at mobilizing resources for countries battling various diseases. This financial injection supplement funds from other donors, all managed by the Global Fund to address malaria and related ailments in Nigeria. The allocated funds are crucial in financing essential resources such as insecticide, treated bed nets, and diagnostic testing for malaria. We'll go on a short break, but when we return, we'll be joined by our guests. Don't go away.
Corruption not in my country.
Now, yeah?
Yes, Oga.
Okay.
Where I go come find 300 naira change?
I better try look for change now. When they do business. Hey, Timmy. I did, bro. I be. I beg, give me 200 naira. Make I take sort out this guy. Let's see no get change.
Take it, give us.
I said 200.
Give her 100 naira.
Yeah.
Okay, I agree to pay 200.
How much you think they carry people from that place we carry on the chair?
Oga.
No, they touch me.
Now 100 naira. He agreed to pay.
Because that was what you said was the fair. Why you not go pay you? Why you they extort your customer? You see this corruption, what would they hear for news? They see for people everywhere. Now be this so. This is corruption, not in our country.
Corruption not in my country.
Stop corruption now.
Welcome back. Well, joining me on the program to discuss further is founder, Self-Tro Medical and public health enthusiast, Dr. Glory Alakba. Thank you for joining me on the program, Doctor. So can you widen our knowledge on the lifestyle of the malaria parasite and how it affects the human body?
Okay, so the life cycle of the malaria parasite involves infecting humans, cyclical infection of humans, and the female Anopheles mosquitoes. And so it usually starts when the female Anopheles mosquito, the infected female Anopheles mosquito, takes a blood meal on humans, and then there's a growth and multiplication of malaria parasite in the liver, and then the red blood cells. And so when it gets to the red blood cells, it keeps brooding, and multiplying, destroying other red cells. And it's at this stage that we'll begin to see malaria symptoms. And so by the time another free female Anopheles mosquitoes comes to, bite humans that's taking a blood meal, this mosquito now gets infected, from an infected individual, gets infected with the parasite. And then from there, within the mosquitoes now, it takes about 10 to 18 days to now, migrate to the salivary glands of these mosquitoes. And at the end of the day, when there's another bite to another uninfected humans, these mosquitoes now, release something we call sporozoites. So it's part of the stage. I'm going to, skip all the jargons and all that, but it's part of the stage in the life cycle of malaria. So once this infected female Anopheles mosquitoes now bite another uninfected human, it will release those sporozoids back into the liver cells. And so from there, we start another cycle again from the liver, red blood cells, multiplication happens, and then symptoms occur. From there, another mosquito comes to take a blood meal. So that's how the cycle keeps going and going. That's the natural history of malaria. So thank you.
So malaria seems to be a global issue. So what are some of the effective strategies for prevention and treating malaria in high-risk areas?
Okay, so globally, Nigeria has 26% burden of the global burden of malaria. So Nigeria alone houses about 26% of that burden, the global burden. And so it is very, very important that we have preventive measures and also treatment measures on malaria, and so against malaria. So for these preventive measures, it's very important that first and foremost, if you don't want to have malaria, don't get bitten by mosquitoes. So if you prevent ways that to prevent being bitten by mosquitoes, use insecticide treated nets, mosquito repellents, and ensure that environmental sanitation is key. Because if we don't sanitize our environment properly, that's having stagnant water, getting rid of stagnant waters, clearing bushes, and then, of course, using well-covered windows, doors, and all that, and then wearing long clothing to ensure that we don't get bitten by mosquitoes. These are ways we can prevent mosquito bites. And again, for treatment, once you have treatment, I think what is being recommended now in Nigeria is artemisinin combination therapy. So the ACTs are quite effective now. There are different combinations. We have the artemether-lumefantrine, we have artesunate mefloquine, artesunate amodiaquine, and all those other ones. And so we also have dihydroartemisinin piperacin. And so these are ACTs, artemisinin combination therapies that have been used to treat malaria. Yes, so these are some preventive ways. And then I also talks about vaccines against prevention of malaria. So these are some of the things we can do to prevent and also treat malaria.
Okay, so pregnant women, children seems to be at the more receiving end of malaria. So are there any specific prevention or medication recommended for them?
Yes, so for specifically on the 5s and pregnant women, they are more susceptible to this infection, malaria parasite infection. And so it is very important that on the 5s are it's important that we tell them to sleep under insecticide treated nets and also prevent them from having mosquito bites. These are children who they might not really have built, immunities and all that against this malaria parasite. And for pregnant women also, there's a low immunity in them. And so that's why there are intermittent preventive therapy for pregnant women done periodically. They are being given prophylaxis against malaria infection during the course of pregnancy. And also for under 5s and all that, they're being encouraged to have chemoprophylaxis against malaria. So parents are advised to carry out those preventive measures I earlier mentioned. And so it's very important because these people are vulnerable. Their immune system is quite low, and so it is very important that the burden of malaria is lifted from this set of people because it would affect them adversely, and then they have more risk of coming down, either maternal mortalities, that's for pregnant women, and also for children, we're having more under 5 mortalities. So if we can prevent malaria, we'll be able to prevent some of these mortalities.
So in region where malaria is prevalent, what role does community health initiative play in reducing transmission rates?
Okay, then community health initiatives are very important. They play a significant role. First and foremost, they cause behavioral changes at the level of the communities. So if we don't have those community health initiatives going to the rural communities to tell them malaria can kill, put together, said that malaria has killed even more than COVID, even more than snake bites, even more than accidents, road traffic accidents. So malaria is that deadly. So if we are at the community, if community initiatives, go down to grassroots levels, the rural areas, to tell them about the menace malaria can cause, and then cause a behavioral change at the level of the rural communities, that's a very, very big role. And a lot of community health initiatives are doing that. And so they've also gone as far as encouraging people, by the time, vaccines are made available, they will, improve acceptance of these vaccines. And also, they also, preach, the acceptance of insecticides, the correct use and acceptance of insecticide-treated nets. And so those are very significant rules that these community health initiatives put in place. And they also serve as, a bridge between the government and the people. So letting the government know exactly the measures to take in order to prevent malaria. So these are very, very important rules that community health initiatives take.
Okay, so are there any long-term effects of malaria?
Yes, let me say long-term effects of malaria. So there's something called complicated malaria and uncomplicated malaria. So in complicated malaria, you could have something like cerebral malaria, you could have severe anemia and other things. And so those things can lead to long-term complications and probably even death. And so these are things, these are just, malaria is deadly in the sense that it could predispose one to a number of significant complications at the end of the day when, left untreated and causes a significant problem. So that's where we begin to have kidneys, you can have acute kidney injury from a lot of complications that might have come from, all the symptoms that must have occurred due to malaria. And so, like I mentioned, cerebral malaria as well. And so these things can lead to lifelong complications.
So what can governments and international organizations do to further combat the spread of malaria globally?
Okay, so governments would have to, create an enabling environment for the prevention strategies to work. And so, that's employing health workers to deal with the burden of malaria. Governments can also, provide facilities that would aid, the proper distribution of malaria vaccines when they come. So the cold chain system has to, be properly fixed. So these are things that governments can do. Apart from that, governments can improve on more education against malaria. So health education against malaria. So governments can also, have a hand in that. And then, for prophylaxis, so governments would ensure that pregnant women, are advised, and in fact, it should even be a policy that pregnant women are always given chemoprophylaxis against malaria, and even under 5s as well, if possible, and encourage regular checks, for parents, regular checks of their under 5s against malaria. And then also they can liaise with international organizations to get funding, provide funding for more community health initiatives, and also for health facilities to, have basic things available to combat malaria or complications of malaria. Yes, and then provide insecticide-treated nets and encourage the correct use and of these nets. Those are things that governments could do. And then for the international organizations, of course, they could provide funding for the government and also resources and the vaccines, drugs, effective drugs against malaria. So these are things that the international organizations can do.
So how does malaria affect different age groups, such as children or elderly?
Okay, so like I said, for children, it could be really devastating. You know, they could come down with complicated malaria, especially for under fives, because their immunity is not strong, and they cannot really fight. You know, they cannot really withstand the symptoms of malaria. And so these are different age groups, even the elderly as well, pregnant women as well. These are different groups of people that malaria could really affect and you know, adversely. And so it can vary in different groups. You hardly see maybe an adult who is, you know, that has a very good immune system, who is immunocompetent. You can hardly see really brought down malaria. That's if left untreated. And then they could come down with malaria, you know, complicated malaria, but not as complicated or not as severe as how an under 5 or a pregnant woman will come down with. So sometimes the age group and our weight and all that and our immunity can contribute towards the severity of this malaria infection.
Okay, so are there any promising vaccine candidates or other preventive measures on the horizon of malaria?
Yes. So currently, the World Health Organization recently, you know, approved R21 Matrix M vaccine, malaria vaccine. And so, currently, I think 12 countries in Africa will distribute about 18 million doses of these vaccines between 2023-2025. However, for Nigeria, I think we should be expecting it to be approved or be brought in mid-year, probably sometimes next month or June or something. So we're still expecting that to commence in Nigeria. And so vaccines are currently, you know, available, you know, have been approved by the World Health Organization. So it's something that is a breakthrough in science and breakthrough in the clinical practice. So these are promising future for the prevention of malaria.
So how does climate change impact the distribution and prevalence between various strands of malaria, and how does this affect treatment approaches?
Okay, so climate change has contributed adversely to the propagation of malaria infection, because looking at the rising temperature, you know, increase in flooding, then of course, because there are so many waste dump sites here and there, waste hotspots and all that. And so these things are like breeding sites, and, you know, are like, you know, places where these vector, that female anopheles mosquitoes thrive. And so they like in the tropics, it's already hot and all that. So they thrive in such weather. And so it's increased temperature and all that. Climate change would contribute adversely towards the you know, propagation of malaria parasites, malaria infection. And so it is, you know, devastating and contributes to health in a very, very advanced way, in a way where, if not dealt with, there will be further health implications all arising from climate change. And so these are not good signs. And so we need to put more effort in the mitigation and adaptation of climate change.
So are there any natural remedies in the prevention of malaria treatment aside the normal medicines that we know?
Well, yes, there are natural remedies against malaria. But the problem with, you know, using these natural remedies is dosaging. So some people might abuse the dosage and then come down with other complications. You may shut down their kidneys from using herbs and all that. So it's very important that dosage, you know the required amount to use and all that. Are actually very effective natural remedies against malaria, but there should be caution. So whenever anyone has malaria or anything, you can discuss with your doctors, and then get to know very effective drugs that you will use that are not resistant to and all that. So it's important to discuss with healthcare provider to ensure that you don't just go into using herbal or natural remedies against malaria.
So as individuals, what can we do to contribute to the ongoing effort to eliminate malaria worldwide?
Okay, so as individuals, the best thing we can do is to ensure that ways that we've been taught to prevent malaria, that we implement them. You know, you sleep under insecticide-treated nets, as I've earlier mentioned. You ensure that your environments are clean, you don't keep stagnant water, you don't allow water to stay, because that can serve as breeding sites for the malaria parasites. Also, or breeding sites for mosquitoes, yes. Then we can also, be ready to accept or use the vaccines when they are being brought to use in the country. Another ways as individuals is to ensure correct treatment of malaria. When it comes and people just take the drugs and they feel better and they just dump their drug without completing the dose or completing the prescription. So it's really not a good habit. So health-wise, we need to have proper health-seeking behavior. So don't just feel like if you have a fever, you have body weakness and all that, joint pain, and then you just go over the counter and get an anti-malaria and all that. So it's very important to seek advice from your doctor or your healthcare provider and decide on the proper treatments to take with malaria. So as individuals, we really, really need to be self-aware and have a behavioral change towards our environment and towards our health. So, yeah.
So the United Kingdom has committed £1 billion to the Global Fund in a move to combat the scourge of malaria and other diseases in Nigeria. Do you think this will further help?
No, of course it will, because funding is a very important factor in implementing whatever policies or whatever intervention one wants to put across to people. And so once you have funding, you will be able to carry out some initiatives, some projects, and of course reach out to the ends, reach out to the rural communities, the vulnerable, the underserved communities. And so the funding will go a long way. So it is very important, to be very useful and to go a long way to solve this problem.
Okay, well, founder, Safe Through Medicals and public health enthusiast, Dr. Gloria Alakwa, thank you for lending your thoughts on the program.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And that's it on this episode of the program. Many thanks for watching. See you next time.